Media Unit School District 302 at 7:02 p.m. I'd like to let everyone know that this meeting is being live streamed and archived for access at any time by our community members on the internet within 24 to 48 hours of the meeting's conclusion. So please rise for the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, roll call.
Mrs. Barber.
Here.
Mr. Carey.
Here.
Mr. Lawler.
Here.
Mrs. Pavlak.
Here.
Mr. Rivas.
I am present.
Mrs. Witt.
Here. All right, so we have a quorum with 6 members present. Does any member want to move something from consent to new business? Nope. All right. Nope. So seeing none, we'll move to the approval of the agenda.
So moved. Seconded.
Any roll call?
Mr. Carey.
Aye.
Mr. Lawler.
Aye.
Mrs. Pavlak.
Aye.
Mr. Rivas.
Aye.
Mrs. Barber.
Aye.
Mrs. Witt.
Aye.
Motion carried 6-0. So the next item on our agenda is appointment of a person to fill a vacancy on the Keeneland Board of Education. So Mr. LePayton has stepped down and we had 45 days to fill his position. I don't know if there's any discussion or if we can just start with a motion. So I would like to, oh, go ahead. No, I'd like to move that we appoint Mrs. Meg Junk to the Board of Education to replace Peter LePayton.
So moved.
So moved by me, second for Mrs. Witt. And a roll call.
Mr. Lawler.
Aye.
Mrs. Pavlak.
Aye.
Mr. Rivas.
Aye.
Mrs. Barber.
Aye.
Mrs. Witt.
Aye.
Mr. Carey.
Aye.
Motion carries 6-0. And so the next item of business is actually the administration of the oath. Yes. Yep. So is the administration of the board member oath. And Mrs. Junk, if you could meet me at the microphone so we can both be heard. So I'd like to introduce Mrs. Meg Junk. Like I mentioned, she's replacing Peter LePayton for the rest of his term, which goes through the general election in April 2019. And again, we'd like to thank Mr. LePayton for all of his years of service on the Keeneland Board of Education. Mrs. Junk has volunteered in the Keeneland community. She works at Wabansie Community College and has a young child, so welcome.
Thank you.
So we will take the oath, so you can repeat after me. I, Meg Junk, do solemnly swear
I, Meg Junk, do solemnly swear
that I will faithfully discharge the duties of the office of member of the Board of Education
that I will faithfully discharge the duties of the office of member of Board of Education
of the Kaneland School District
of the Keeneland School District
in accordance with the Constitution of the United States,
in accordance with the Constitution of the United States,
the Constitution of the State of Illinois,
the Constitution of the State of Illinois,
and the laws of the State of Illinois,
and the laws of the State of Illinois,
to the best of my ability.
to the best of my ability.
I further swear that
I further swear that
I shall represent taxpayer interests by serving as a faithful protector of the school district's assets,
I shall respect taxpayer interests by serving as a faithful protector of the school district's assets.
I shall encourage and respect the free expression of opinion by my fellow board members
I shall encourage and respect the free expression of opinion by my fellow board members
and others who seek a hearing before the board,
and others who seek a hearing before the board,
while respecting the privacy of students and employees.
while respecting the privacy of students and employees.
I shall recognize that a board member has no legal authority as an individual,
I shall recognize that a board member has no legal authority as an individual,
and that decisions can be made only by a majority vote at the public board meeting.
and that decisions can be made only by a majority vote at a public board meeting,
And I shall abide by majority decisions of the board
and I shall abide by majority decisions of the board
while retaining the right to seek changes in such decisions through ethical and constructive channels.
while retaining the right to seek changes in such decisions through ethical and constructive channels.
Welcome. Thank you. Can you sit down next to Mr. Layton? All right, and then it's time for salutes.
Yes, we have, if you were here, which most of us were because it was just 10 minutes ago, we did a reception to recognize our new teachers and have our board members and administrators have the opportunity to meet our new teachers. Those that could attend tonight, want to thank Linda Ross and Chris Adkins, Director of HR, for putting that on tonight. So if you would, if our new teachers could just stand quickly. You don't have to introduce yourself again, but just stand quickly. And thank you very much for being here. And we'll just give
Thank you.
Thank you again and welcome. Yeah.
My apologies for not being here today, but I had to take care of business at home. It's sticky stuff all over my hands right now. So welcome.
Thank you and welcome again. The only other thing I had now, even though the fall sports are still ongoing, I wanted to just share that we did have 3 harder golfers, 3 8th graders, I believe, that qualified for state and went to state last weekend. And I'll just give you that overview now because they'll come in with the fall sports along with the rest of our high school and middle school athletes in November. But since it was timely and current, I just wanted to share that we did have 3 golfers go to state. So very cool, and you have the opportunity to meet them in November.
Very nice.
That was all I had for salutes.
All right, any other salutes? No? Okay, so the next item of business is public comment. There's actually going to be 4 opportunities for public comment tonight. This will be the first one. Yes, feel free to go. So the board values public input to inform our decision-making and to provide information and insight into what is happening throughout the district. Board meetings are held to conduct the business of the Board of Education and are required by law to take place in public. However, they are not public forums. We use the public comment section as an opportunity to listen to our stakeholders. For that reason, the board does not enter into debate or respond to questions spontaneously or without proper investigation and deliberation. In most cases, concerns or questions requiring follow-up will be referred to the superintendent. If you choose to speak publicly, we ask that you stand, state your name and village of residence or your association with us for the record, and limit your comments to 3 minutes or less so that all who wish to speak may have that opportunity. You are encouraged to seek a private appointment to discuss matters concerning individual students or staff members. While public education can be an emotional issue, and understandably so, the board strives to maintain a certain level of decorum at the meeting. Those who speak are expected to maintain a tone of courtesy and civility. The floor is now open to public comment. Nothing after that. All right, so we will move on to the consent agenda. Tonight, the consent agenda consists of the approval of accounts payable and payroll for September 2018, the approval of minutes of the September 10th, 2018 regular meeting and the September 8th, 2018 special meeting, approval of resignations and employment of staff, approval of 2017-18 administration and teacher salary and benefits report, approval of III conference attendance expenses, and the following informational items: the student suspension data report, the Freedom of Information Act FOIA report, and the field trip notification. So I'd like to entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda.
So moved.
And a second?
Second.
And a roll call.
Mrs. Pavlak?
Aye.
Mr. Rivas?
Aye.
Mrs. Sparber?
Aye.
Mrs. Witt?
Aye.
Mrs. Junk?
Aye.
Mr. Carey?
Aye.
Mr. Lawler?
Aye.
Motion carried 7-0. So now we'll move on to new business, which is the first item of business is the public hearing and approval of 2018-19 Fox Valley Career Center budget. I don't know if there's anything you want to talk about or if I should just open the hearing.
Open the hearing, and then I'll give an overview of the agendas there.
Perfect. Yep. So I'd like to call the meeting, the public hearing to order for the Fox Valley Career Center budget hearing at 7:10. And Dr. Fuchs, if you have an overview.
Sure. The Fox Valley Career Center, as you know, Kaneland Board of Education serves as the administrative agent for Fox Valley Career Center. Therefore, we have to approve their budget. Fox Valley Career Center also has their own board of directors consisting of the superintendents of each of the school districts that participate in the center. The superintendents have approved the budget that you have in front of you. The budget that you have in front of you is now on the ISB state budget form. We have, similar to Kaneland, we have been working on the Fox Valley budget since last year about this time, more so December, January, February, but nonetheless, it's been a little over a year in process. This board approved a tentative budget for Fox Valley Career Center in June, and this represents the final budget. The revenue primarily comes from tuition payments from each of the schools that send students to the center, and then the expenditures are primarily salary and benefits. With that being said, I present to you a Career Center budget with revenues over expenditures by $3,015.
Great. So now we're going to move to the public comment section of the hearing. So I will now invite public comments solely on the Fox Valley Career Center budget. So are there any public comments? No? So seeing none, we will close the public hearing at 7:12. And now if there's any discussion about the budget on the board?
Just idle curiosity. All right. Does each school board that is part of the consortium approve this also, or is it because we're the administrators that we actually approve it? And then
Just Kaneland.
Just Kaneland. Just curious.
Yep. We do all their payroll, we pay all their bills, we do their budgets, yeah.
Yeah, no,
As the
I knew that.
administrative
I was just
agent.
curious how it,
Yeah.
if they had to do the budget here and whatnot also.
Yep. Nope, just us.
Thank you.
Anything else? All right, so like, okay.
Do each of the schools do a certain percentage as far as participation, money-wise?
It's based on tuition. So what we do is we figure out how much all of our expenditures are, and then we figure out what that is per student, and then depending on how many students you send will determine the tuition that you have to pay. So the more students you send, the more you pay. The percent of students that you send becomes the percent of tuition that you pay.
Okay. So I'd like to entertain a motion that the Board of Education approves the 2018-19 Fox Valley Career Center budget as presented.
So moved.
Is there a second?
I'll second it.
And a roll call?
Mr. Rivas.
Aye.
Mrs. Barber.
Aye.
Mrs. Witt.
Aye.
Mrs. Junk.
Aye.
Mr. Carey.
Aye.
Mr. Lawler.
Aye.
Mrs. Pavlik.
Aye.
All right, motion carries 7-0. So now, we'll do it again. So, excuse me, at 7:13, we'll open the public hearing for the Keeneland budget. And I'll turn it over to Dr. Fuchs.
As I mentioned, this is the final budget. We are about a quarter of the way through the fiscal year. State law requires us to pass a final budget by the end of the first quarter, which is September 30th. Following the board's approval tonight of this budget, I will post it on our website and also file it with the Illinois State Board of Education and also file it with Kane County and DeKalb County clerks. And it will become our official budget. Similar to the Fox Valley budget, this board approved the tentative budget in June. And we've made some changes throughout the summer, primarily in salary and benefits. At the end of August, the KEA formula was finalized, and so all salaries have been updated and input individually, giving us the total amounts. Additionally, over the summer, we learned what our evidence-based funding would produce. For those of you who are interested, we're planning to get about $6.9 million in evidence-based funding, and that's about $125,000 more than last fiscal year. The majority of our revenue does come from the local property taxes at about 75% of our budget. I do have the highlights for the budget on page 2, and I am presenting to you a balanced budget showing a small surplus. With that being said, I would recommend that the board approve the budget as presented. The other thing that I did not mention with Fox Valley, but it applies to both Fox Valley and Kaneland. You cannot leave the meeting tonight without everybody signing the budget. So Gail has 3 copies of both budgets in the signed folder. Please, please do not leave tonight without signing both budgets. 3 copies each.
Or you're going to make a trip.
Otherwise, I will have to hunt you down.
Literally.
Come to your house.
Exactly.
All right. So now I will open the floor to public comment again, similar to the last one. This is only on the Keeneland budget. Any public comment? No? So see,
What time? What time did you open it?
open it. Well, I opened the
Just-
public hearing at 7:12, I think, and now the
Okay.
public comment, at 7:15, and we can close it at 7:16. So now we'll close the public hearing and we'll move on to discussion by the board. Does anyone have any discussion?
Thanks for all your work.
Yeah, thank you.
It was not single-handedly. It does take a large team of people in which to develop the budget, including the board beginning last September, all administrators, and a whole lot of staff. So thank you. I will share that message with them.
Definitely.
Thank you.
All right, so I'd like to entertain a motion that the Keeneland Board of Education approve the 2018-19 budget for, as presented.
So moved. Second.
A roll call?
Mrs. Farber.
Aye.
Mrs. Witt.
Aye.
Mrs. Junk.
Aye.
Mr. Carey.
Aye.
Mr. Lawler.
Aye.
Mrs. Pavlak.
Aye.
Mr. Rivas.
Aye.
Right, motion carries 7-0. So now we will move on to approval of dental provider change.
Yes, as you know, the insurance company, or the insurance, did Beth get everything she needed?
I think so.
Yeah,
Thank
okay.
you. Just
Okay.
checking,
Yes,
sorry.
that's fine. Dr. Fuchs gives us an update and a recommendation on dental provider, and she'll give some background and then share that recommendation with us, so thank you.
Thank you. We have a health insurance committee that generally meets monthly. Gail is our board liaison for the health insurance committee. A part of what the health insurance committee does is to look for opportunities for savings for district employees and the district. Additionally, we want to make sure that the benefit programs that are available for the district serve our employees well. In January of 17, we switched dental providers because we were no longer satisfied with our current provider. Additionally, they were proposing a fairly large fee increase. At that time, we selected a provider and began to use them. We've encountered a number of customer service kinds of issues with our employees. Our insurance committee has been working really hard to resolve those issues alongside with our brokers from Hub International. While many of those problems have been solved and issues resolved, we're still not completely satisfied with that provider. And so we asked Hub to go out to market and check pricing again. They did that, and they brought it back to the committee last spring. At our last meeting last spring then, we asked to hear from Delta Dental at our September meeting. We did have our September meeting on September 13th, 2018. We heard an excellent presentation from Delta Dental. And so at that meeting, the Health Insurance Committee voted. There was, everybody was there except for one person, I believe. And they did have a unanimous vote to recommend that the board consider changing dental providers beginning January 1, 2019. That will give us time to get everything switched over to Delta Dental. There will be some level of savings, but not significant. But more importantly, we're hoping to see improvements in customer service types of issues. The savings that we will realize, because Delta Dental does have a larger network than our current provider, is with regard to claims. We do run or provide a self-insured health and dental program. So the majority, 95% of our costs are with claims. The other 5% for dental is administrative fees. So the way that we will save money with claims is that we should have more employees that go to dentists that belong in network, and by getting in network pricing, that will provide savings for both the employees and the district. We won't know exactly how much until we know how many employees go to the dentist, how many are in network. They do run statistics, and we do believe that there will be a larger percentage of our employees that will go to dentists, their current dentist, if they stay at the same place in Delta's network, but we won't know until the year goes through. So at this time, I'd be happy to answer any questions about our recommendation that we change dental administrators effective 1/2019, January 1.
Any questions?
Is this just a year-by-year renewal, or is it a long-term?
It is year by year, and we typically renew in the springtime. Yep. The dental comes with the health insurance renewal. Typically at the late April or first May meeting, we get the renewals. Our renewal will typically take place July 1, but our plan year runs January 1 because of deductibles.
I hate asking this question, but I will. Will other districts use this dental plan?
Some do, some don't. Some are self-insured, some have where they're fully insured. So yes, Delta Dental has a very large clientele. very large. I don't know that I have the statistic of how large.
Yeah. Hey,
They are
it's only
big,
the
though.
service.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, Gail.
They are very big.
Anything else? Nope. All right, then I'd like to entertain a motion that the Board of Education direct the administration to implement a change in dental administrators effective January 1st, 2019, from Guardian to Delta Dental.
So moved.
Yeah. So moved by Pavlik, in a second.
Second.
Any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, roll call.
Mrs. Witt?
Aye.
Mrs. Junk?
Aye.
Mr. Carey?
Aye.
Mr. Lawler?
Aye.
Mrs. Pavlik?
Aye.
Mr. Rivas?
Aye.
Mrs. Sparber?
Aye. Motion carries 7-0, so we'll move on to approval of donations from parent groups.
Yep, as part of our policy annually, usually through Julie, through Dr. Fuchs, all of the donations through our booster clubs, PTOs, PTAs, PTNs, come to the board for final approval, and it's always a wonderful opportunity to showcase, as you saw in there, some of the totals and some of the amounts, but I'll let Julianne share more of the information.
Sure, thank you. So I was able to collect all of the information from each of our parent groups. Our total donations this year are a little over $115,000. Those parents do a fabulous job raising money for our students across the board. You can see all of our special needs students have a PTA, our sports, our performing arts, and then each of our schools, with the exception of the high school, they have both of the sports and performing arts boosters. I've put behind the total sheet in the front the letter or the memo or the information so that you could look at some of the specifics in terms of what they've contributed. These are all of their contributions throughout the 17-18 school year. And so we're very excited to have parents that work so hard on our behalf to help support the students in our district. So I believe we're going to plan to salute them at the next board meeting on October 10th, but we wanted to make sure that the board accepted the donations at tonight's meeting.
Any questions or discussion? Nope.
The amounts per school, if you will, on these, obviously they're earmarked to that school,
Yes, they are.
as opposed to some other things that we collect and we put them in a bundle and then they're distributed.
Yes, because they're raised by those parents and those families for each of the schools.
It just bothers me that, yes, I appreciate the efforts that they put in, and obviously you can, not that it's, I don't know if it's more populated areas or whatever it is and such, but in one shape or form, it seems like the distribution is
You know what,
way out of whack.
To that question, I see an error where it says the KME Parent Teacher Organization, the total amount. If you look on the back, it's about 10,000 less. They took the line above the total.
Oh, goodness.
And it makes it look like it's only a third of what the others.
Thank you, Teresa, for
Got it.
pointing that out.
I was
can
looking at
get
that too, so-
Yep, I can get that
Sorry, Pedro.
updated for the next meeting, or I can tell you in a few seconds here what the new total is. Thank you very much.
So it's another
So the KME donation is actually $15,362.08. Thank you so much. I apologize.
Sorry, Pedro, I just thought maybe that's what
No,
you were
no,
getting at.
that's,
Maybe.
Yeah.
that was part of it, yes, thank you.
So
for
let's
pointing that
see.
out.
Minus 506.4 plus 15,362.08. So your total then is actually a little over 125,000, 416.80.
125, 416.80?
Yeah.
125,
Yeah.
460.
I'm so sorry, I picked up the number right above the total. I must have thought that big space there. I don't know how I did that, but anyway.
Case in point, I know it says Keeneland High School Sports Boosters. I know they participate and they shed light on funds towards the middle school as well. So that's one of those that's kind of distributed amongst, and I don't know if it goes down to the elementary level and stuff. I
To
don't know.
my knowledge, it just goes to the high school and middle school. High school and middle school. I don't believe they send it to elementary. So in next year's report, I can expand that and include high school. I don't know if they'll be able to break it down for us on how much goes to which. I'll have to ask them if they would be able to do that for us.
And I don't know if that's the same case for the arts boosters. Or do they
Yeah.
have their own here at the middle school?
I don't believe they do, but I don't know.
I think it's one. I mean, I think you're right. It's probably better to make it both schools identified as such.
Identified as such?
Yeah, you know what? If you look at their list, there is stuff for both schools, so we can definitely expand that.
Probably contact them sooner rather than later because they've already started for the school year.
Yeah. They've itemized it. We'll just have to split it up by school next year if that's how you'd like to see it.
It's
Or just
back to my
acknowledge it.
original point.
Yeah.
Basically, it's my original point. There's so many disparities here. If I just uniquely, not to really pick off the elementary schools. I mean, still, yes, it helped. Thank you, Teresa, for identifying that.
Oh.
But it puts it a
That
little
didn't
closer.
fix it for you? Oh, that's okay.
But I don't know, and I'm sure these are designated for certain things. I know in the past, I've identified it to computers and all this other good stuff, which I'm very grateful. I'm just saying, I don't know, it's just,
Are you trying to say if Stewart gets a new playground and no other or another elementary school does for 10 years, we should be cognizant of that? Is that?
yeah, I just don't want students in general to be shortchanged because of the school they're in.
And I think,
Main point.
I think that's why we approve it. You also can fix that in the budget, but are we? I mean, maybe that's what you're asking too. If one school gets computers from a PTO, do other schools get it in some way as well? 'Cause it would
Again,
have to be
I don't want to
selected.
negate the effort that's put here. I totally appreciate it. I just want it to be as even as possible from distribution amongst the schools. That's the main point.
Thank you.
Okay. Any other comments? Okay, then I'd like to entertain a motion that we accept the donations in the amount of $125,416.80 from the Keeneland parent organizations for the 2017-18 school year.
So moved.
Is there a second?
I'll second that.
Any discussion on the motion? And then a roll call.
Mrs. Junk?
Aye.
Mr. Carey?
Aye.
Mr. Lawler?
Aye.
Mrs. Pavlak?
Aye.
Mr. Rivas?
Aye.
Mrs. Barber?
Aye.
Mrs. Witt?
Aye.
Motion carries 7-0. So thank you definitely for those generous donations.
Yes.
So next we'll move on to the approval of bond refunding plan.
Yep, I'll turn it right over to Dr. Fuchs. Says
You again.
last
It
week,
is.
sure.
Our speaker had to be at Somonax schools at 7.
Are we going too fast?
We did. We did. He is not here yet, but I expect him probably by 7:45. I believe that we could do one of two things. I can do this because I can. We've done it at FAC, and I've refunded several bonds in the seat, so I'm very comfortable doing the presentation. Or we could maybe do some superintendent board reports and then go back, but I don't think we're gonna have 15 minutes of
We don't.
superintendent
The only
board
thing that would be
reports.
15 minutes is if we did closed session and then came back, so.
So let me go through the materials with you.
Please.
And then when Bob gets here, Bob Lewis from PMA, our financial advisor, if we have any questions that I'm not able to answer, that's why he needs to be here. So how does that sound?
Perfect.
All right, so, first of all, the district has a number of outstanding bonds. The bonds are used or were used to construct new buildings. With that being said, the bonds that we sold were of a variety of different kinds and at different times. Every 10 years, many bonds can be called, which means that you can refinance them or refund them. That process is similar to your mortgage. So you typically will redo a mortgage at your house because you want to take advantage of lower interest rates. When we refund our bonds, we can refund them at lower rates, which will save our taxpayers dollars.
Sorry. This doesn't affect the operating budget of the school district at all, correct? It's just the taxpayers it affects. If we save them money, their tax bills go down. It doesn't matter how much there's available for other things in the school.
That is absolutely correct.
Thank you.
If you'll recall, in another month or so, when I bring the levy information to you, we'll have an operating levy. It's that levy that affects the budget, the operating budget. There's another portion of the budget called bond and interest that also has a levy, where the county clerk knows how much we owe, and they know how much we owe in that fiscal year. They will collect that money from the taxpayers, give it to us, and then we'll make our bond payments from there. Those two monies are separate. You cannot use bond money for operating expenses.
Thank you.
You're welcome. So with that being said, right now the bond market is still pretty good. So we should be able to see some savings with this refunding. If you turn past, Bob can go over the different Fed funds rates and things like that. It basically says that the market is still good and interest rates are low. The interest rates are starting to climb, so we're lucky that we have a call date. Our call date is February 1, 2019. We're legally allowed to refund these bonds up to 90 days prior to the call date. If you look at the page where it says a review of existing debt, you can see all of our outstanding bonds. I'm looking at this page. It says outstanding principal in the top right-hand corner. These are all of our outstanding bonds with the principals. If you look down near the bottom, there's a row called callable. There are two outstanding bonds. They're the 2009 A bonds and the 2009 D bonds. Those were both used to build Harder Middle School in 2009. Both of those are callable on February 1, 2019. So those are the bonds that we're talking about. The first bond, the 2009A, is $14.48 million, and then the 2009 D bonds are $8,075,000. If you look below the word callable, there's a rate range. The range for the A bonds was between 4.5% and 5%, and the range between, for the D bonds is between 6 and 6.125. I believe current market rates are still somewhere between 2 and 3%. And so let's go ahead and turn the page for just a moment. And what this page does is shows all of the existing debt and what it will look like. Ryan, in the last column on the right-hand side, it shows the BNI tax rate. BNI stands for bond and interest.
Okay.
So when I do the levy, that's what I was talking about. There's an operating levy and there's a BNI or bond and interest levy. When you add those two things together, that's how you know what your total tax rate is for the school district. So the BNI tax rate is separate from the operating levy. The one thing that I want to mention about the 2009 D bonds, those were our Build America bonds. For the Build America bonds, we were able to take advantage of a government program at the time. If you'll recall, that's the same time that the economy had just pretty well sunk, for lack of a better word, into recession. So the government put out a special program that said, if you build and sell bonds during this time and keep the economy going, we'll help you pay for some of your interest. So each year when we do the levy, I abate back to our taxpayers the amount of the interest that the government is paying for that, so about $171,000 per year. The last 2 years, this fiscal year and last fiscal year, I was not able to abate because we needed that money to pay for our debt service for those debt certificates for the additions at John Shields and John Stewart. But if you'll recall, those debt certificates will be paid off in February. We have one more payment to make, and then we don't have to pay them anymore. The debt certificates, we didn't get to collect a levy for it. It had to come out of operating dollars. So for most of it, we were able to use our impact fees from our municipalities. But then that fund depleted so much that we had to find a different source of revenue for that. When we refund these bonds, we will no longer have Build America bonds. We'll have a regular standard general obligation bond. And so I won't have to do the forms and things like that to get the federal government to give us back a portion of that interest money. And so there won't be any further abatements because we won't have it to abate.
So that'll be a give up, but it's still worth it, is that?
That's right.
Okay.
So let's look at how worth it will be. Let's turn to the current refunding scenarios. If you look, this first one pretty much goes over all the details that I've already talked about. It has the details of the bonds, the average interest rate, and then the details of the other one. Yep.
Which page are we on?
Yep.
Okay.
This one is called Series 2009 and D bonds.
Thank you.
You bet. Sorry about that. This page again reminds us what we did with the money. We did the new middle school, which is harder. We built an addition to Blackberry Creek, and we remodeled and repaired Kaneland Middle School with some of these dollars. Okay, I'm going to have you turn the page, please, to the debt service comparison page. This is where you get to see what you save. So on the debt service comparison page, you can see the column labeled new debt service versus old debt service. The old debt service is our current debt service. The new debt service is an estimate. The final amounts won't be known until after we go to market and actually refund the bonds. PMA is typically conservative. The last time we did a refunding, we saved the taxpayers over $7 million, but we were refunding a whole lot more, and the bonds that we were refunding had higher rates than the bonds that we have today. Typically, what the best practice is that if you can save more than 3%, you should refund. And we're looking at saving about 6.459% in the bottom right-hand corner. The number, the 1.98, has to be converted into a present value because those dollars are future. As you see, our bonds go through 2029. When you convert that to a present value amount, our net savings will be approximately $1.5 million. Now, again, that's not savings to the budget. What that is each year you'll see how much we owe. The county clerk will send us that much money. For example, in 2020, instead of sending us $1,048,000, they're going to send us $1,046,000. So what that means is they're going to collect less money from the taxpayers because we've saved money by refunding the bonds.
The new debt service column, what interest rate is that at?
I don't remember. Just one second, please. I don't know that it has one in there. Oh, if you look at the bottom, it says based on current market rates plus 0.25. So they've built in a little extra in case if the market changes. And if I go back to the page that I skipped, showing all those lines with the market, let's take a peek and see if we can tell where they are. We're going to look at the 10-year. So it's the light. It's about 2.5%.
So we're guessing that.
Somewhere in there.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, I'm gonna be a pain and ask a bunch of questions about how this sheet looks.
Okay,
All right.
would I be able to finish,
Yeah, please. How
the
do you want-
last, I've got 2 more slides, and then maybe Bob will be here to help a little bit too.
No problem.
And can you just tell me, is the old debt service net of the interest? It would be, right? It's net of the interest that would have been abated.
Yes, it is.
Yeah, it says net.
Yes.
Okay.
All right, then, so if you look at the next page, it's got all of, it says current refunding level overall debt service detail. Take a look at that. You can see the 2 bonds that we've been talking about, 2009 A and D, they're zeroed out. But then you see in a gray column, a little further over, proposed, 21.8 million current refunding 2018/19 at a little over $28 million. And then, actually, Ryan, look at the bottom there, the note. I was a little bit low. He's got it estimated at 3.3%. I had said 2.5.
Okay.
So it's about 275 plus the 0.25. So actually 3, and then the 2.25. So somewhere in there.
Okay.
Yep. What I want to point out is that your tax rate there, take a look at that right-hand column. The bond and interest tax rate continues to climb under this scenario or proposal for 2 more fiscal years after this one, and then it starts to decrease. So those are good things. As the bonds continue to get paid off, that tax rate goes down. I'm going to show you the next page, and that's the last one, then we can start on questions, Ryan. The next one, this is interesting. Teresa, I don't know if you recall, but way back when we first sold bonds, this page here went up.
Yes.
Because at that time, it was built on the philosophy that EAV would go up every year, and your new property taxpayers moving into the district would help to bear a burden of the cost of the debt. That's no longer the philosophy because we got burned with that philosophy because EAV actually went down and nobody could have predicted it. And that's why our tax rates went sky high, is because remember that in my tax levy presentation, there's that little weight. It's an inverse relationship between tax rate and EAV. So now the current practice is to try to level out your debt so there's no sharp declines and no sharp inclines over any time period so that it pretty well stays level. By doing so, if EAV does go up, and in that page before we have it estimated at going up at 2% per year, then the tax rate will actually come down slightly per year. The other thing that this does, the light gray on this chart in the last year, the light gray represents our current debt. The dark bars represent the refunding. When we refunded in 2016 and 2017, we knew that we had one more place on our debt structure that we needed to fix. By refunding this last piece of the puzzle, our debt structure now, the dark bars, are much, much more level. There's no balloon at the end. So the FAC felt very comfortable and confident about this plan. Let's see. I had one other thing I wanted to share, and then Ryan, it's your turn for questions. So the FAC did review this with PMA at their September meeting. We did have a quorum, and there was consensus that they recommend, or that we recommend this plan to the board. And for right now, I guess, Ryan, why don't you go ahead, and then we'll see how we do.
Sure. Can we go to current refunding of Series A, B bonds and level overall debt service estimated, blah, blah, blah.
Yep,
Just because I want to make sure I understand this clearly. So with the guess at what the interest rate that they're putting in there, and what we currently have, the fixed amount, it's fixed our interest rates on the bonds, we're going to save 1.9 million over the course of the life of the bonds.
yep. And by the way, we are not planning to extend the bonds. So currently the bonds go through 2029. When we refund them, we'll refund them for 10 years, and it will end at the same time, 2029.
All right. So we're saving roughly $2 million over the course of 10 years.
Yes,
But then you got to figure out the current value versus the future value of the money.
that's correct.
Where's the 312 come? What's that?
The 312.
Transfers from
For
prior-
transfers from prior debt issue service fund, about 33 lines up.
Okay, hold on one second, please. I gotta get there.
No problem.
Oops, page before me. Oh, there it is. You know what? That is, I believe, the last payment. Hang on one second. Transfers from prior issued debt service fund. We have that one more payment, and they've got that in here for the debt certificates. I believe it's that, but let's double check with Bob when he gets here. Just one second, see if I can find it. Prior bonds. Just one second. Because I think it's the debt certificate. Because we don't, we owe about that much money on it, and we've got to pay it, so. Let's see, are they in here? No, it says 320,000. You know what, I'm gonna hold that question for Bob to be sure that I don't give you wrong information.
All right. What's the next line below that? Continuing to a rounding amount. What's that mean to me?
Oops, hang on,
No problem.
I'm on a different page again. So, I believe that has to do with the interest. I'm gonna have him do those two as well. So,
Okay. No,
Yeah.
that's fine.
Yeah.
Sorry, Ryan, on that same page, can I ask a question? Is there?
see, this page isn't, keep going. This isn't my favorite page.
I think I heard you right, but maybe I misunderstood you. I
Yep.
thought you said that the 2 million is actually lower to 1.5 million because of future monies. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay, so it's not about these other numbers being subtracted from it, though?
No,
Well, if I read the page right, we go from 1.7 of the net present value, and then you subtract off the 300 to get to the 1.4.
I guess that's where I was confused too.
I don't know.
Okay.
Okay. Sorry, I just,
Yep,
yeah.
no problem.
Okay.
I'm not gonna make something up.
No, I appreciate that.
I typically look at the 1.9, and then my eyes go right down to the net present value, because that's the number that's meaningful.
When you said it made a lot
And
of
then
sense to
the
me.
percentage,
Yeah.
but those ones in between, I haven't hardly ever paid any attention to.
Okay.
So, sorry.
What page do I turn to see what all this is gonna cost us?
You know what? That slide is not in the presentation. Bob, our PMA's cost is the 50,000, and that's what they won the bid on in 2016, and they have not increased their prices.
Julianne, didn't they say at the FAC meeting that these numbers were net of all costs?
Yes, these are net
Okay.
numbers.
Oh, okay.
Yep. These are net. So all costs are already taken out.
All right, so, okay, that was gonna be, if they've already got that figured into the savings, which should be on this
Yeah.
page. we just-
And I believe he is bringing a page with costs with him. He'll have colored copies,
All right.
and he'll be here soon.
Come on, Bob.
Sure he will.
Pressure.
Never letting other schools go first again.
Oh,
They had a hearing with theirs, and so they had to do it right at 7, so I had to let them go first.
Do you wanna just give me the 30-second definition of the legal debt margin page,
I can do that.
please?
So,
Legal debt margin, the very last page.
So, as a unit school district, we have a legal debt margin of 13.8% of our EAV. So EAV, if you'll remember, is the total value of all of our properties in the district. Our debt, we cannot take out more debt than 13.8% of our EAV. So this tells us how much of our debt margin we have left, or that we're using.
The very bottom row is what we have available?
Yes, the dollars.
Okay.
So if you'll recall, this was very interesting. Maybe 7 or 8 years ago, we were over our debt limit.
It's been more recent than that.
It's been a little while.
Yeah, no, I
So-
just remember it from when I was on the board that we were over it.
That's
So
right.
it's-
And the reason why we're over it is because when we sold these bonds in 2009, our EAV went down, but we still had all the debt.
Right.
So now that EAV is climbing again, we've got some room. So if you'll recall, when we were over our debt limit and people were saying, well, are you going to do another referendum? No, we can't. We're over our debt limit. We couldn't if we wanted to. The only way you could do it at that time was if you got legislator approval to go over your debt limit. Now, we're no longer over our debt limit, and we do have some room that if we wanted to sell more bonds, which I'm not suggesting we do at any cost here, but what I am saying is now the board has the flexibility, if they needed to, that they could for buildings, because you have some room.
So it looks like we pick up about 8 million a year going forward.
And remember, that's based on EAV going up by 2%.
Okay.
It's an estimate. Yep.
So I just wanted to reiterate what the FAC said at their meeting. They were very interested in evening out the spike, the post-2026 spike in the, in our tax rate. And they were completely in approval of the plan, so. just wanna Put that out there.
So I have a plan C. Why don't I see if I can get him on the phone and put him on speaker? And see if you all can hear him.
He might
While
rather
he's
not
driving?
drive out here if he doesn't have, I don't know.
Why don't you just call him and see where he's at? And
All right, see how close we are?
Yes, please.
I can do that.
It's fine.
Salutes?
Probably walk in the door.
They can get in out here though, right? Okay.
Bob, how close are you? Where? I think he's in the building because I can't hear him. Oh. Okay, he's turning off at 47.
Where?
Okay. Sounds good. We'll wait patiently. We just have a few questions. I'm done with most of the information. So, okay, thanks. Bye-bye. So he's just turning off at 47?
Yeah, he's just turned on harder probably.
Yeah.
I can go ahead and do this while we wait.
Sure.
Yep.
Sure.
We'll just
So we'll
table that.
table, go ahead.
Just on this thing, can we just also mention that although we may have the ability in the debt margin, we could go to referendum, no one is saying that we have any interest in doing so.
No.
No, I was,
Certainly
I
not.
There's
pointed
no
it out
tolerance
just,
for that in the community at this time.
Understood.
I was just pointing it out as that we're.
Oh, I know.
We have
And
the
it's great
ability-
that it's positive,
Exactly.
so.
All right, so we're going to table this for a moment, I think, and move on to the superintendent report.
Yep. Thursday night, we have our monthly Citizens Advisory Committee, CAC. And it's always the same time again, 7 to 8:30 at the high school. And Mrs. Barber is our representative. And the topics that we have for Thursday night, we have Tim Wolf's going to come and do a couple of tech updates. We're going to have Alice and safety update. And then also from last year, our CAC committee members asked for some information on how to try to stay even or ahead, if it's possible, of their kids on their apps and on their phones and on technology. So, as you know, in the spring every year, we do a safety meeting, and Mrs. Savilic, who is here, hosts that meeting. So we invited Mrs. Sevilla to come Thursday night. So Thursday night at CEC, she'll be sharing that information. So if anybody else here is trying to monitor their kids, stay ahead of their kids, you're welcome to come also. So it's going to be that topic, also with some opportunities for Q&A for parents to ask questions about apps and technology. And then, while I have captive audience and CAC topic, in October, I want to thank Fran. Fran secured a guest speaker for us, because again, one of the other things our parents asked for at CAC was more information on mental health, mental wellness. So we do have somebody from Linden Oaks coming to pretty much take up the entire time to share an update on mental health issues as it relates to parents, to schools, parenting students in schools, and so we have that person coming in October. So more information will come on that, because that's still a couple months, or a month and a half, 2 months down the road. Next thing I have, again, is no school on Monday, October 8th, in observance of Columbus Day. So our next meeting is indeed on a Wednesday night. So it's Wednesday, October 10th. Then the last thing, Thursday of last week, we had our annual foundation golf outing. And we had, I think, 48 golfers. And in the last couple of years, we've had anywhere from 48 to about 52 golfers, and about the same number of vendor sponsors and prize donors. Cheryl Crosby will be here, our foundation president, in November with our grant recipients. We've invited them to come November, so they'll come and they'll share some highlights of their grants and what their grants are going to, and maybe show some videos or some highlights also. Good. And so the date for next year, it's always the third Thursday, and it's going to be at Bliss Creek again next year. Yeah, so it's September 19th of 2020 or 2019 for next fall. Okay? Any questions on foundation golf outing, CAC, or our day off school? Trying to talk slower, ask more questions. If there's anything else before Mr. Lewis gets here?
I do have a question about, so is the CAC is getting an Alice update. Is the board getting an Alice update soon?
It's going to be the Alice update that the board received in the summer.
Oh,
But as we get closer into the school year, yeah, so it's more in arrears for them. But as we plan more events throughout the school year, the Safety Task Force has charged the committee with the next steps. And so what we'll do is we'll provide an update here, then we'll probably do another parent summit in the spring for where we're at on Alice. One of the things that we have communicated with our staff and our parents, as we do next steps, we will be sure we let our parents know what kind of drills are coming up and what they'll look like. That way parents know what's going on. And also, if you were at our law conference with us or just happen to remember the law change for this year, that we are required whenever we do any of our active shooter drills, that we do have police presence on hand to take part in the drill with us. So that was the best practice most of the districts have always done in the past, but now it's law and it is required. Julian, anything else from the Safety Task Force while we're kind of on that topic?
No. Hi, Bob.
Okay.
No, we continue to meet and look at best practices, and we'll be meeting again in a couple of weeks. So if you want, you can hand out the things, and then I'll tell you which pages we have questions on. Thanks,
breather. You just,
While he passes that out, we'll conclude the
Thank you
superintendent
very
board
much.
report. Julianne, did you have anything on that? Or
I
any board
don't,
members?
I'm good to go.
perfect. Nope.
I had one other thing about FAC.
She did.
Okay. Julianne, or board members, Teresa does have one comment on FAC.
I just wanted to mention,
an update.
the FAC, when they met, the other thing they talked about besides bond refunding, that I think the board might have an interest in is, they have been approached by teachers to join the committee, and I wasn't sure that, I mean, it seems like, teachers have another outlet, and this is my opinion, have another outlet to get their voices heard, and they don't necessarily need to be on the FAC, but if they live in the district, I don't know what the legal ramifications are, if they're a taxpayer in the district, if we would have to allow them on the committee. I suggested it made more sense for them to ask for, teacher input, and they should reach out to anybody they need, but I don't necessarily think that we need anybody from the district that has a financial interest in what the district, I mean, I know taxpayers have a financial interest, but I mean like an income interest, being on the FAC. So that is something that's coming. I don't know, there may be other opinions. I just wanted to kind of put that out there, that they're thinking about it. And we might have that come to us.
Thank you.
So,
Thank you. We can check our bylaws too and see
yeah.
what is in there also.
I think, okay.
All right, if you'll all turn to page 10 in the colored handout, I'll have Bob answer Ryan's questions. Bob, I'm able to explain the savings and the net present value, but a couple of those things in the middle I don't really pay attention to.
Sure.
Can you start with the one that's the transfers from prior issue debt service fund, and then the contingency amounts? What do those represent?
So when you do a refunding, it creates savings in your first year. And your first year, you've already levied and collected those taxes. So in the first year, the savings would be $312,000. So instead of, you really can't leave those in the bond and interest fund. They're levied and collected to pay bond payments. So what we do is we contribute those, what would be excess, as a source of funds to the refunding. So now you're selling $312,000 less principal than you would if you didn't contribute those funds. So we net them off the savings, so you're not double counting that benefit.
Let me rephrase what you said, so I think I...
Sure.
We already collected $312,000, that's in an account somewhere, we're not giving it back, so we're keeping it and using it as paying down part of the bonds.
Right, yeah, otherwise, if we didn't contribute it this first year, where you just see a dash, which is representing 0 there, it would be positive 312. And it would just sit in your funding. And this is essentially the way to give it back to the taxpayers, is to contribute as a source of funds. So now you borrow that much less and pay that much less interest on the $300,000 that you're not borrowing.
Okay.
Okay?
What's the next line?
The next line, the contingency rounding amount, when you sell bonds, they're sold in $5,000 increments. And I know this is slightly more than $5,000, so it might not make sense. So since bonds are sold in $5,000 increments, when you come up with what you need for all the purposes of the bond issue, there's going to be an amount that's remaining from that bond sale. This is the amount that's remaining that comes back to the district and would go into the bond and interest fund. And it's slightly more than 5,000 because we're running two purposes here in our numbers. You have the refunding of one series and a refunding of another series. When we actually finalize the numbers, those would be netted off each other, so it would be less than $5,000.
Still me? I didn't know if anyone else had a question, so I didn't want to.
I was going to have him do page 13, which was not in the other packet.
Just an overview, not answer questions, just the overview.
Yep. You want to go ahead and go over page 13 for us?
Sure. So page 13 are the estimated costs of issuance, although most of these are nailed down. And if you compare these to what you had the last time you sold bonds, it should be very close. We're holding our fee constant, which is the same thing we've had on prior to the fundings. Same thing with Chapman Cutler. The rating fee would be different because it's coming off. That you just can't negotiate. You pay the rating fee that they have. And then the other ones are off their fee schedules as well. Any questions on that? And this is netted out of the savings. So the savings calculation you see on the other page is already netted out an estimate for the cost of issuance.
All right, so if I go back to page 10, that 1.9 million stays, that's after everybody gets paid.
Exactly.
What page was it we were guessing the interest rate?
Those like pages 1 and 2, the market charts.
Well,
you want to go over the market charts?
Sure, I'll go over the market charts, but the estimate for your interest rate, if you look at page 10, and it's kind of hard to see, it's buried a little bit. When we do the present value calculation, you have the present value of that back at a rate. The rate that we use is called the AIC. So it's right here, it says 3.446. The AIC is a rate that factors in the interest that you pay plus the cost of issuance. AIC stands for all-inclusive cost. Now we've added to that an additional 0.25%, so you probably, if you sold today, be somewhat lower than that number. When we calculate this, since we did it, rates may have ticked up just a little bit, so it may not be 0.25% per, so maybe it's 17, 18 basis points. market update at the beginning.
What page are you on?
Slide 3. Slide 3 is just a visual representation of all the factors that impact municipal bond market. I've circled 2 of those items there. And because those, especially the one at the top, and I know these are ovals, not circles, so. People tend to focus on the Federal Reserve when it comes to interest rates. The Fed meets tomorrow. They conclude their meeting on Wednesday. It's pretty much assumed by the market that they're going to raise the Fed funds rate another 0.25%. And the market's looking more at what is their narrative that they were, the press release with that rate increase. Now, it doesn't mean on Thursday rates will be 0.25% higher, because the market has already factored in changes in interest rates. But indeed, the Fed funds rate has its biggest impact on the first couple years, and that's what I'll talk about in the next slide. But before we get to there, I want to talk about the other major change that we've had in the market. It doesn't have a big impact on you this year because supply is so low, but with the federal income tax change last year, when they lowered marginal tax rates on individuals slightly, but on corporations a lot, from 35% down to 21%, it changes the incentive for those corporations to hold municipal bonds because they don't pay as much in taxes, so it doesn't benefit them as much to own a tax-exempt bond. So corporations include banks and casualty insurance companies. So all other things being equal, that should lower the demand in your bonds, causing interest rates to go up. But this year's been a really low supply in the municipal bond market. Municipal bond supply nationally is off 30%. It's off about that much in Illinois. We're pretty close to the national trend. That's because of some other changes in tax law. They eliminated the ability to do what's called an advance refunding. It's one that's more than 90 days from the call date. Your refundings are current refundings, so it doesn't impact your plan of finance here. But the loss of advance refundings in the market is what's led to that big reduction in supply. So had they not eliminated advance refundings, a change in tax law may have been a negative on you this year, but overall, the change in marginal tax rates has been more than offset by the reduction in municipal bond supply. Slide 4 is an interest rate chart. We have graphed here 2 different interest rates. We have the gray area in the back represents the federal funds rate. And that, you can see after the 2001 recession, how it moved up, flattened off, and then it came back down rather quickly when we had the financial crisis start in 2008. And then for a 7-year period, the Fed funds rate stayed exactly the same. Over that time, you see the blue line represents the 1-year municipal rate. This is an index. It isn't necessarily meant to indicate where you borrow. It's an index, just like the Dow Jones Industrials is an index. Well, that 1-year rate was right on top of the Fed funds rate, telling you that there's a near 1-to-1 correlation between those 2 things. But if you look at the 5-year, the 10-year, and the 20-year, during that 7 years the Fed held rates constant, those other rates were moving up and down all over the place, which tells you all those other things I was on that other chart are what influence medium long-term rates more so than Fed policy. So this is a way to explain to you, as the Fed's raising rates on Wednesday, doesn't mean, again, that it's going to substantially or at all increase your borrowing costs, because you're borrowing on a 10-year bond issue, not a 1-year bond issue, and the market's already factored in that change anyhow. So, any questions on the market? You know, generally speaking, you can see in this chart, before I allow you to ask a question, from a historical perspective, we're still near historic lows. We're not as low as we were a couple years ago. You can see we hit the lows just before the presidential election. Presidential election occurred, caused a rather precipitous change in the municipal bond market because of certain assumptions that that election might have on the economy. And since then, it's been relatively stable, except for the short-term rates, which have been going up because of Fed funds policy. Any questions? Looks like you have one, right?
I do, but I was going to wait till you were done.
Oh, I'm done.
Okay. I guess it's more of a statement that you correct me if I'm wrong, but you're asking us to approve this refunding plan tonight. But that doesn't lock us in until after the sale or the day before. There's a time period at which we can say, this isn't going to save us money?
Yes. So can't remember, did we put a preliminary timeline here? I can't remember if we did or not.
I don't think so, Bob.
No. So the
We
plan is.
have it, but.
Right, and I remember that, yes, we go through this process, but up until the time that you go to market for the bonds, or even after, is it?
No, as soon as you sell the bonds, the rate's set.
Okay,
So next month, we come to you with a resolution, just like we did the last two refundings. If the board approves that resolution, they're authorizing the administration and the board president to proceed with the refunding, subject to meeting certain parameters. And up until, a few days beforehand, I'll be dialoguing with Dr. Fuchs and talking to her about where the market's at. And if there's some substantial change that we feel we need to come back to the board, we would. But if everything's sort of in line with what we've shown you here, then the sale would proceed, the delegates would approve the sale, and they're obligated to report back to the board at that point, the results of the sale. Again, if something is substantially different, your delegates and me as your financial advisor aren't going to push a sale through that doesn't meet the expectations of what the board had.
and the sale will be sometime in December?
No, October.
I'm off on my day count, sorry.
Yeah, that's fine. And it'd be later October. I wish I put that, I don't know why I didn't put the timeline there. I usually put a summary timeline in. Later in October with a closing in November. So you call the bonds under call date and then lock the rate. And then you will accomplish the goal of the restructuring plan, which was to level off your debt service. You would have you probably covered the chart, Julianne, but
Yes, that one.
as you can see how you, a couple more, 17 is what you're collecting this summer, and you have 18, 19, and 20, so it's just 3 more years of modest increases, then you'll be leveled off. No more increases in your levy, which is great, because then as your EAV grows, your bond interest tax rate will continue to fall, which hasn't been the case historically because your debt payment was going up and your EAV was coming down. Now you're going to be flat debt, EAV going up, knock on wood. And so that means your rate will be going down over time, which is great news for your taxpayers, because as new property comes in the district, that new property picks up a share of the debt, and everybody else's share of the debt will go down if the payments stay the same. Which is where we've been looking to get to for a few years now.
Dr. Dukes, could you, or both of you together, talk about the, the process of, the actual process of the refunding?
Go
As
ahead.
far as, because I know you don't you talk about our rating
Yeah,
a
we
little
set
bit,
the
and
call date.
we're
Go ahead.
interviewed for that?
Yeah, we have a rating call. We're going to prepare the first part of October 1st for that call. I think we're tentatively trying to schedule for October 4th. I don't know if, I think we need to confirm availability for everybody. And then we get the rating back about a week later. We're going to Standard & Poor's because they provide a higher rating for the district, a AA. Not anticipating a change in that rating, given that the underlying factors have roughly stayed the same since the last time you were rated. But keep in mind, that's the third highest rating, so it's a very strong rating. During this time, we're also producing a document called the official statement. That's the market that's used, or the market. That's the document that's used to market your bonds to the market. If you're going to be an investor who's going to buy the district's bonds, imagine you want to know things about the finances, the economy, the administration, all that's summarized in the official statement. So we're all working on that now. We go through a couple rounds, sometimes 3 rounds of that draft. We hold a diligence call to make sure that material information has not been misstated, and also that all material information has been included so that an investor can make an informed decision. So that will be finalized around the time we get the rating back. Then you allow for a week from the time we make that available to the market. We advertise your sale with a bond buyer on Bloomberg, and then we take bids through an auction platform. We'll talk about, there's a couple different auction platforms we'll talk about later on which one we'll recommend for that. And when you get the bids in, you should, given this size of the sale, and it's a relatively short financing, 10 years, it's going to be very attractive to the market. AA rating, low supply, 10-year financing, 20+ million. I anticipate we should get somewhere between 5 to 7 firms bidding on that. And whichever firm gets the lowest TIC, which stands for true interest cost, which is a combination of their rates and their fee, they win the bond sale. And then from that point, it's about a 3-week process until closing. During the time between the sale date and the closing date, the attorneys will prepare a slew of closing documents that if, those of you who have been board officers in the past should recall that you have to sign a lot as a treasurer, secretary, and president. Those documents are then provided back to bond counsel. Certain documents are filed with the county, because what the county will have to do is they'll abate the levies on the old bonds. They will no longer collect taxes, and the bonds are funded. And then new levies will be filed for the new bonds to match whatever the final schedule is. And then going forward, your payments will be what they look like in the graph. Well, any other questions? And then you won't see, you don't have a call date to 25, so, it'll be a while before we do anything.
Other questions?
Brian. Yeah, just kidding.
All right.
I'm done.
All right, so I'd like to entertain a motion that the Keeneland Board of Education approve the bond refunding plan as presented and direct the administration to execute all required documents, which includes the amount of bonds to be refunded, the anticipated timeline for the sale, the type and number of bonds to be sold, and the cost of issuance.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? Roll call?
Mr. Carey?
Aye.
Mr. Lawler?
Aye.
Mrs. Pavlik? Aye. Mr. Rivas?
Aye.
Mrs. Barber?
Aye.
Mrs. Witt?
Aye.
Mrs. Junk?
Aye.
Motion carries 7-0. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Glad you made it.
They had all their teachers show up for the meeting, so.
It took a little longer than expected.
Yeah, just a little longer.
Understood.
See ya.
Yep, thank you.
Welcome.
So I guess we are down to topics for future agendas.
Question? Are we due sometime, a report on the ticket system you're late at the high school system? Huh?
The Hero?
Yes, Hero, thank you. Are we due for one of those one of these days?
Yeah, we have, good question. I've been in touch with Mike Rice. We have the Hero and then the activities that we had talked about over the summer, having them. So Mike's working with the high school to come up with a schedule to be able to come back and share that information. So I've got it on the trusty black book to come back. I just don't know exactly what month, but it's going to come back.
Okay.
Anything else? Okay, then I was going to say the second, I guess the fourth opportunity for public comment, but the general public comment, any public comment? No? Okay, seeing none, we do have an executive session tonight, and we do anticipate action at the end of executive session. So we're going to executive session for the appointment, employment, compensation, discipline, performance, or dismissal of specific employees of the public body or legal counsel for the public body, including hearing testimony on a complaint lodged against an employee of the public body or against legal counsel for the public body to determine its validity. So I would like to entertain a motion to go into executive session.
So moved.
Second? I'll second it in roll call.
Mr. Lawler?
Aye.
Mrs. Pavlik?
Yes.
Mr. Rivas?
Aye.
Mrs. Barber?
Aye.
Mrs. Witt?
Aye.
Mrs. Junk?
Aye.
Mr. Carey?
Aye.
Motion carries 7-0, so we'll go into executive session. good?
Fine.
All right, so the Board of Education of the Kaneland Community Unit School District 302, we are reconvening at 8:56 PM. All right, and I would like to entertain a motion that the Kaneland Board of Education dismiss Ms. Kim Kochman effective September 24th, 2018 for multiple and egregious violation of Board Policy 5.20, workplace harassment prohibited, and Board Policy 5.120.4, and Board Policy 5.120.8, employee ethics, conduct, and conflict of interest.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
And a roll call?
Mrs. Paddock? Aye. Mr. Rivas?
Aye.
Mrs. Sparva?
Aye.
Mrs. Witt?
Aye.
Mrs. Junk?
Aye.
Mr. Carey?
Aye.
And Mr. Lawler?
Aye.
Motion carries 7-0. And now motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you.
It is.
8:57.